If you've been seduced by today's one-size-fits-all approach to beauty, health, and weight loss, it's time you discovered the truth about beauty. Welcome to this Connection special. I'm Patricia Gras. As a top beauty expert working with celebrities, our guest tonight thought she knew every beauty trick in the book. But then an eating disorder and a health crisis forced her to forget about the mirror and endless diets and find the ultimate answers to a puzzle no one was really solving. Where does beauty come from? Here to offer advice on how you can break free from the merry-go-round of diets and short-sighted beauty solutions and get a powerful jumpstart on your own physical and emotional transformation is Kat James, a nationally recognized holistic beauty and health expert and author of The Truth About Beauty. Kat, welcome to The Connection. It's great to have you here.
Great to be here, Patty. Thanks.
My first question is, you say you have the truth about beauty. What is that truth?
The truth about beauty is probably that if we focused more on health, beauty will always follow. There are a lot of them, I must admit, in the book, but that's the key message, I think.
And you learned that from your own personal experience with an eating disorder. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I probably would have continued on my path toward degenerative disease and avoiding, never having the chance to look anything like I do now or what nature intended if I hadn't gotten sick. Mm-hmm. And so it took me a health crisis to stop looking at the scale and looking at my latest hair and makeup tricks to make up for what was really happening with my body and to get serious about myself.
What was your situation like? I mean, this was in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
How many years ago? 15 years ago?
Yep. Just about.
And what was happening to your body?
I had been in this eating disorder. It was bulimia for about 12 years at that point, and I started to have warning signals I couldn't ignore. You know, the weight and all of the embarrassment with how I looked wasn't enough, but eventually I started having health problems like heart palpitations, strange digestive issues, blurry vision, and it was a digestive issue, which turned out to be a liver issue. That was really what got me to start to explore some things on my own, not just what I was being told.
And there was a turning point, you said in your book, that a visit to an herbal store. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, being in New York, luckily there were some, and this is the very early 90s, and I walked in and for the first time wasn't seeking a health or a weight loss or beauty book or a calorie counting chart, and started to look up my specific health issue. I had never cared about any health issue before, but I had to get out of this liver issue. It was an inflamed liver, and they didn't have an explanation for it, but told me I would need to be on a very problematic drug that had a bad history, and that I knew it would be going downhill starting the age of 24 if I started that drug. So something compelled me into a little health food store, and I started looking up in the indexes of all the books, liver, and seeing what they came up with, and the same herbs came up, started to take them. Didn't believe in them at all. I grew up in Michigan, and my sister lived in New York and was eating brown rice and real butter, and I thought she was the weirdest sister in the world. And so I found myself taking these herbs. And long story short, 3 visits back to my liver specialist, and he threw his hands up and said, What have you done here? Because these liver enzymes are abnormal. And I just thought it might have been a fluke. And so I kept on reading and fixed one problem after the other and had a kind of a cascade of different amazing rebalancing things that happened in my body and with my skin and with my weight. And it was an amazing succession of real transforming things. So I became a believer.
Why do you think it's more important to focus on health than it is to focus on, let's say, weight loss?
It's not second nature, really, to focus on health, strangely enough. I mean, they've done, they did a sunscreen study where these university researchers went to the beach and showed pictures of skin cancer to one group, and then another they showed wrinkles. And can you guess which group wore the sunscreen? The group that was shown the pictures of the wrinkles.
That's right.
So it took me a crisis, and so what I can only hope to do is show people my transformation, the drastic difference, and what I did without today's extreme measures just by regaining my health. And I never would have imagined how powerfully transforming it was. So I wouldn't even, if you came to me without knowing what I had done, I wouldn't have been able to just say, wake up one day and say, my motivation is health. I needed to be shown or have a crisis.
Right.
But I believe I can show people that.
What are some of the tools that transformed you?
Definitely supplements, and that was probably the most unsung, the thing I had to dig the deepest to find information on. And actually that was enabled me to experience a change even before I had fully changed what I was eating. As I said, I grew up in Michigan on the iceberg lettuce salads with the Thousand Island dressing and the hydrogenated croutons and the artificial bacon bits. And I went to New York and started to change my ideas of eating, and liked ethnic food and had the first not overcooked vegetables I'd ever had, but I still had the eating disorder. And so it was the health issue that prompted me to fix the liver disorder. And then I was able to just continue to experiment with things and get informed, and then had an emotional epiphany and shrank 10 dress sizes.
Wow, and you talk about the information, and there is a lot of information out there about supplements and things that you need to take, but who do you trust? Because you talk about that, you can't really trust the government, you can't really trust the media. Who do you trust, and where do you turn?
The one thing that you shouldn't trust is an entity or a degree or a lab coat. You have to trust individuals, and you are the only one who can decide who to trust. And one doctor is different from another doctor, and a nutritionist is not a nutritionist. There are holistic nutritionists, and there are registered dietitians. Many of those are focused on calories, fat grams, and avoiding major diseases like scurvy. And then there are those who have taken it upon themselves. You pretty much, even if you're a doctor, have to be self-taught if you want to learn more about things that aren't in the mainstream journals necessarily, but overseas studies or independent studies. And luckily, more and more of these are the studies are being funded by the NIH. Like since about '97, more things are, being legitimized, even though they've been very real and working for all the other countries.
For a long time. You mentioned in your book about resources. You mentioned PubMed, is it? Mm-hmm. PubHealth for information, so you can turn there and learn more about.
Absolutely, and if you Google, which is a great tool, and a lot of people say, watch out for the health information on the internet. The truth is, if you just trace things back to a university study or a published study, it's very easy to tell what's true from what's not. And if you Google PubMed, that's a very, very large database, and you'll find more and more studies that a lot of professionals say don't exist. Right on that database.
So it's a site for information. It's a site for health information.
Absolutely.
Database, okay. Now, you also use a teaching tool in your book, and that's myths. Mm-hmm. The myths out there that exist. What are some of those myths?
For example, that beauty requires hard work. That getting a beautiful body, you don't look like you have to work hard,
yes, I do.
But that getting a beautiful body would require the no pain, no gain mentality, and that losing weight really just comes down to fewer calories and exercise more, and it's actually not true. There are studies now that exist that show that one group can eat the same number of calories, and another group that's eating in a different way loses weight and eating the same number of calories. And this is proven in a lot of ways. So it's really there are health issues, and balancing the health issues are the answer to the body working the way it's supposed to in relationship with food. And it's those health issues that get kind of glossed over in this day and age, where we're really chasing after the extreme makeover from the Stairmaster and from the calorie deprivation standpoint.
So it has to do with biochemistry, and you talk about cells, that's really what's going to transform you. You have to have healthy cells. Tell me about that.
Well, you know, we see, again, referring to the extreme makeover, the success story, and the person holding their pants out to there. Look, I lost 100 pounds on whatever.
Surgery.
And very often, that person is not any healthier on a cellular level. There are certainly inherent benefits to losing the weight, but they might not have balanced the issue that's actually the cause of their tendency to put on weight in the first place, and will be literally climbing up possibly the wrong Stairmaster for the rest of their life, and always fighting cravings and shoulds and shouldn'ts, and taking it one day at a time, you know, the way that an alcoholic needs to take it. Right. When in fact, if they had taken the time to look at, and usually it comes down to 5 or 6 different key health issues that contribute to the average American's weight gain. We've been hearing about Syndrome X and metabolic syndrome, and now the type 2 diabetes statistics are amazingly high. Well, that's one issue. There's also the serotonin that we all know about, the feel-good hormones in the body. The balance of estrogen dominance can cause a pear-shaped body, and amongst other problems, which I had that issue. I had thyroid issues. Thyroid issues are an undiagnosed epidemic in the country.
Very much so.
And there are other issues as well, and it's really, it's actually easier in the long run if you are given the information just to easily know if you're fighting one of these issues. And there are supplements and also conventional ways to face these issues, and not facing them. It's tragic in a way, because you have to spend so much effort and buy into that hard work myth.
Mentality. What do you mean when you say that you have to go through a process of shedding?
Probably the best example is after this whole journey that I had, where I basically balanced things one after the other. I still have the situation where I might be giving a talk, and someone will raise their hand and say, "What did you start doing the day you lost weight?"
And they say,
one day. "What did you start eating?" And the truth is that I didn't go on a diet that day. I had balanced a lot of things, and I call it the last click of the Rubik's Cube. It was a lot of factors that need to be in place, and what we tend to want to do, again, in this oversimplified mentality that we have, is look at one thing that's the trend. Let's say the latest weight loss pill focuses on cortisol, or focuses on thyroid, but it's never a bird's eye view of a lot of things, because most people are dealing with many issues.
Yeah, what are some of those things, important things? You mentioned metabolism, you mentioned serotonin. What do people, if somebody is watching this and say, "I want to change my life, I want to start transforming myself," what's the first thing they need to do?
It's good to get exposed to what a lot of these health issues are, because you certainly, if you can have the luxury of going and having, for example, your thyroid checked, although the problem is that conventional testing often doesn't catch thyroid issues. And there is, as I mentioned in my book, the Barnes basal temperature test, which is the gold standard in the alternative world, which anyone can do at home. And then there are the serotonin issues. That's something that is best measured. But if you're someone, for example, who in the dark winter months craves carbohydrates, it's a serotonin thing. Carbohydrates raise the serotonin. If you are someone who feels drugged after you eat, or feels like you need something sweet to get you through the afternoon, you probably are metabolically challenged. You're probably having issues with spiking your own blood sugar. And that's a can of worms, because as soon as you do that on a regular basis, which unfortunately most of this country does, you become insulin resistant, meaning insulin, which is secreted in order to keep the blood sugar levels stable, it's not being registered by the cells anymore. The cells, as an addictive drug that you get too much of, it's a similar thing. They become resistant to the effects of insulin, so you need more and more insulin means more fat storage.
Right. One of the problems with diabetes type 2, which is an epidemic now.
Yeah.
do a lot of things yourself for so many years after you learn what to do. What are some of the things that you do? And some of those are very simple, like changing the type of water that you take a shower in. Tell me about that.
Well, I have to tell you that my whole approach to beauty was affected very much by this whole lesson, and it comes from a sudden revelation over the years, if that's not an oxymoron, that we're harsh on ourselves. That we buy into the extreme makeover, the no pain, no gain, and then also as a beauty consumer, we buy into the, go and get this deeper injection and this deeper laser, lunchtime peel, and wow, this will really sop up all the oil, new and improved, clean deeper, and the squeaky clean mentality, and great fragrance, and all of these things are actually coming at a price. Some of them are downright toxic, and others just simply, like the average skincare regimen, completely destroys the skin's ability to do the right things, destroys the lipid barrier and the acid mantle of the skin. And so this is the same thing that a lot of the weight loss approaches, when you're starving yourself and just deciding to cut down on calories, it's an assault on the body, and it throws you further off balance so that you're more and more dependent just on damage control. And you never really just step back and find the solution. So bringing it back to the skin issue, the first thing you get when you go to I'm going to go to a dermatologist, I'm going to do the real regimen now. Right. Whether it's acne or wrinkles, what that means for acne is a drying regimen, a skin drying regimen. And you immediately, again, lose that acid mantle, so the skin doesn't have the ecology to fight bacteria anymore. Right. And it also loses its waterproofness, which is part of anti-aging. It's one of the most important aspects of the skin for anti-aging. And with the wrinkle approach, the problem here is that it's the peeling and sanding and zapping approach as opposed to the regenerative approach. It's much more smart to regenerate and actually thicken the skin from within, both through diet but also topicals that can be delivered deep into the skin, than to thin the skin. Women's skin is actually thinner than men's, and using alpha hydroxy acids, for example, over a period of time actually tires out the collagen-producing fibroblasts of the skin. And so it's destroying your skin. So what should you be doing? I mean, you're giving me examples of the types of creams that we shouldn't be using and the things we shouldn't be using. What about nutrition? Okay. How does that affect your very, very much face? So, and more than almost anything. If you are, for example, again, spiking your blood sugar again and again, you're also exposing the tissues to glycation, which is sugar's effect on the protein. And you will have wrinkling. You may have heard that in Nicholas Perricone, whom I interviewed for my book. Glycation happens not just in the skin, though. And that's the other thing, is looking at what's happening in the skin is what's happening through the body as well. But back to glycation, it's a breakdown of protein, and the proteins themselves, once they're broken down, actually emit free radicals in the body, and at a certain point will start this cascade of accelerated aging. And smoking increases glycation, but eating things that spike the blood sugar. And for one person, the typical things that we hear about to avoid, like white flour and sugar, might be the only things that spike the blood sugar, and juice or soda. But for another person who is insulin resistant, which is now probably more than 40% of the country, then you have you're even more vulnerable to these blood sugar spikes with things like whole grains. Right. So eating things that should be healthy things, but we're compromised in our cellular health, and so we can't eat what we used to. What are some of the basic things that we can start doing? Let's say I want to have better skin, I want to start shedding some weight, I want to feel better, I want to have more energy. Basic stuff. I mean, for example, we talked about coffee. Yep. So first the idea should be to give yourself a sanctuary from the worst harm. Okay. So, and there's a sort of a self-inventory in the book, and if you look at that, and where am I causing the greatest harm? Then so stop the harm before you get all focused on something else. And one of the most common ways to cause ourselves harm is by drinking the wrong beverage. And the beverage can matter more than the food because there's no fat, fiber, or protein in most beverages to slow the absorption of the sugar. Now, even coffee, it will raise the insulin and give you a subsequent blood sugar low. And most people don't realize that. It also raises cortisol, which chronically raised cortisol it causes inflammation and breakdown of tissue. So, but it's the sweet beverages. If you can upgrade and make that one change, that's a huge difference.
No more sweet beverages
that you'll see.
Right.
And so that allows the taste buds to change. It reduces probably the biggest assault between food and beverage, the beverage, and lets you begin to resensitize your taste buds and also your cells. So upgrading doesn't have to be hard. It has to. You just focus in on what's your autopilot self-sabotage.
Right.
And instead of this thing that you do, you do it day in and day out. So what if you replaced it not only with something that doesn't harm you, but something that really protects you and does the exact opposite thing? Right. And a couple examples for upgrading coffee would be to green tea. Green tea is anti-inflammatory, antioxidant. It's a heart protective, and they just found out that coffee for up to 50% of the population has a genetic interaction that might increase heart attack. Right, and so, and so now the other thing is, you might think, well, giving up coffee, I can't do that.
Yeah, I love it.
And people are too harsh on themselves again when it comes to giving up things.
Don't be extreme.
Right, and I'm really passionate about, the reason I have so many resources in my book is I'm very passionate about connecting people also with things they might not know about that would make that transition easier.
Right.
And I try not to say substitute because it sounds sort of second rate.
Right.
I say upgrade.
Upgrade, okay.
And actually, if it's the right upgrade, you'll love it more and feel better, much more on it than the regular one, the first choice.
Another one that's very important that you mentioned in your book is get rid of sugars. Sugars are really bad for you, and you have examples of what you can do about that. Tell me.
Sure. First, the reasons to give up sugar, in case anyone has any doubt and hasn't heard them all, is that it lowers immunity. After you eat things that spike your blood sugar, your immunity is lowered for hours after. It's pro-inflammatory. It feeds cancer cells, feeds yeast and fungus, and also obviously the weight gain. And sugar will make you gain much more weight than fat does. And really, one of the best things you can do is to become someone who has sensitized themselves not to needing that taste. Now, the upgrades. There are things that many people aren't aware of that they can use in place of sugar that are not only not harmful, but healthy. Xylitol is one of them. It sounds like a chemical. They even call it a sugar alcohol. Contains neither sugar nor alcohol. And it occurs naturally in the body. It's from birch. Sometimes it's from corn. And it is a substance that looks and tastes exactly like sugar, but is anti-tooth decay and builds bone density and stops certain bacterial infections. It's pretty amazing.
It tastes good.
And it tastes amazing.
Give me an example of your diet.
My diet is probably far more decadent than it ever was.
You must eat chocolate.
Why live without chocolate?
That's right. That's right.
But I start the morning. I don't dabble in diet foods.
Okay.
I don't believe in fat-free. I don't believe in puffed-up rice cakes, and I don't believe in damage control foods that fill your whole plate with as much volume to cheat you into thinking you're eating a lot of food, because once your chemistry is in the right place, you don't think that way at all, and I would have never believed it. So full-fat Greek yogurt is a kind of strained, really creamy yogurt. I sweeten it up with xylitol or stevia. Eggs, I don't do egg white omelets because I know better. I know about what caused the great stir about eggs, and it was much to do about nothing. It was actually a study using oxidized egg powder, and no similar results have ever been duplicated. And so eggs, in fact, it's the yolk with the lecithin that is actually very good for the arteries. And so I do eggs, I do good cheese, and by that I try to get grass-fed cheese, or definitely organic food, organic in the dairy department, because it's even more important for dairy and milk to be organic because the pesticides tend to go in the fat of the animal. So organic dairy. What else do I indulge in? Chocolate, definitely. I was vegetarian for 7 years during the time when I was very heavy. And I don't know if we've shown that picture yet. But
yes, we have.
Okay.
We have. But you look so much better. We'd rather show you
and
today.
Thank you. Thank you. Just wanted to be sure they saw that because that person in that before picture was teaching 6 dance classes a week, and she was vegetarian. And it's not necessarily true that vegetarian is right for everybody. Red meat and high quality red meat, in fact, grass-fed is very different than regular red meat in that it has a different fatty acid profile, more like fish, and so it's a great tool.
Thank you so much, Kat James. We could talk all day about
Absolutely.
this. Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
You are beautiful, so it's proof that this works. Don't forget, we're always interested in what you have to say. So if you have a question or comment about the show, call us at 713-743-8513 or send us an email at theconnection@houstonpbs.org. For more information on Kat James and the truth about beauty, you can visit her website at www.informedbeauty.com. Also, for more information on the Living Smart conference and television show, you can visit houstonpbs.org/livingsmart. Thank you for joining us. I'm Patricia Gras. Good evening.